Hello everyone, Hazah here, and welcome back to Hazah Talk. What topics shall I Hazah talk about? It is time to move to a Five Nights at Freddy's related topic. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. This game had quite a journey, a mix of good and bad. Me and a friend of mine have a lot to go through. Today, Andrew John 100 is with me today. You probably know him from the downfall of FNAF AR video. Go check it out on his channel. So yeah, welcome Andrew.
Great to be here, Hazah. When discussing this game, we'll be talking about its beginnings, its development cycle, its misconceptions, and how it turned out in the end. There's quite a lot of stuff to talk about, so without further ado, let's dive into the troubled story of Security Breach.
We all know that after Ultimate Custom Night's release, it was the moment that Scott started to work with other companies for future games. The next game that would come in the following year was Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted, developed by an indie studio called Steel Wool Studios, and of course with the collaboration of Scott himself. The game was released in May of 2019 and was met with praise from FNAF fans and general critics for its immersion, the recreations of Scott's past games, and as well as the newer minigames brought to the table.
But on August 8th, 2019, Scott Cawthon revealed a new teaser on his website depicting a giant shopping mall-like pizzeria with 80s-style animatronics performing in front of a huge crowd. There was also a year at the bottom which said 2020. That was when we realized that this was for the next entry of the franchise. However, Steel was not done with Help Wanted just yet. They released a DLC called Curse of Dreadbur in October of that same year, and also did well with critics.
Not only that, but we would get our first hints for Security Breach, with the Vanny Mask at the end of Curse of Dreadbur. The last major thing Steelwood did for Help Wanted was the non-VR mode, which we also got another Security Breach hint, that being a silhouette of a mall being built on a snowy night with a billboard from Fazbear Entertainment saying, "Now hiring." After that, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach proceeds to be in development for the next 2 years. We all knew that this was going to be one hell of an ambitious project.
During its 2-year development, a lot of stuff happened. Some good stuff, but not some good stuff. For its first few months, Scott and Steelwool were pretty quiet. Scott would now and then post a few teasers showcasing its new characters and the title of the game. This is also where we got our first look at Vanny, the new antagonist of the franchise, and Vanessa, the new security guard of the Pizzaplex. Before the first trailer dropped in September 2020, Funko got into some hot water when they leaked the name and designs of the Glamrock animatronics in their list of upcoming products. And as you would have guessed, Scott was not too happy and had to address it on Reddit. However, despite his post, Funko yet again leaked Security Breach, but this time teased action figures of the Glamrocks, which obviously made Scott even more unhappy, and said in a comment that things would have been handled very differently from that point. After this, people thought Funko would lose their FNAF license, but even after all that, they managed to keep their license.
At this point, this is where the marketing started to slow down. The first trailer wasn't much, with it showcasing some of its locations. However, it was our first time we heard Vanny and Glamrock Freddy's voice, and it even shows Vanny's original jump scare. But we still didn't have an exact release date, and this was it for the game's marketing for that year. But then, in November, Scott made a Reddit post stating that due to the game's size being way bigger than originally intended, and the fact COVID was causing a lot of Steelwool's employees to work at home, he decided to delay the game to early 2021, when it was originally going to be released before Christmas. We didn't get anything until January rolled in, and Steelwool finally announced something related to Security Breach, and said that another Security Breach trailer would be shown during the GeForce RTX Game On broadcast. The next day, it was shown and it was a letdown. It was just another showcase of other locations we haven't seen before, but it did give us our first glance of the staff bots. But you know, everyone loves the staff bots, and known for being the best characters of the game. A few hours later, Scott addressed that the footage in the broadcast was supposed to be a tech demo, more than anything, and that a new teaser trailer would drop in March.
Fortunately, and knowing how Scott is with dates, the second trailer was released during the PlayStation State of Fair in February. The trailer showcased way more variety and gameplay, our first look at Vanessa, who looks very weird I may add, and a bunch of other cool stuff, but we still didn't get a date for the game's release. so we just assumed the game would drop sometime in late March or maybe April. Speaking of which, during one of Dawko's charity streams in March, he would slowly reveal a total of 9 screenshots from Steelwool that displayed numerous locations, the Glamrock's each individual room, and our first look at Shattered Glamrock Chica. At this point, the hype was real, and we knew we were getting closer to Security Breach's release. Or so we thought.
Yeah, in April 2021, Scott made yet another Reddit post stating that due to the game being way bigger than it originally was intended, it was being delayed to late 2021. Now, a lot of fans were pretty disappointed by this news, but Scott knew that would happen. So, to make it up to the fans, he released a FNAF fighting game titled Security Breach: Fury's Rage, which would ultimately be the last game he would ever create on his own, period. Because, as we all know, June 2021 was the month where the infamous Scott Cawthon situation occurred, and would eventually lead up to Scott's retirement. We're not going to go into detail about it since it's not a nice thing to revisit to, and that it had no effect on Security Breach's development, but we'll talk on that later. So anyway, after that, we didn't hear any news on the game's development from Steelwool. No teasers, no word on if it was canceled or not, nothing. It was like that for the whole summer, until, finally, Steelwool started advertising the game again, with Freddy and Friends on tour. This is a mini-series that stars Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica going on a tour and being chased by Foxy in a Scooby-Doo style chase scene. And in between each episode, there would be a glitched frame of a shattered animatronic, as well as a glimpse of a new character at the end of the episode, like bits of the Blob, the daycare attendant, DJ Music Man, and even Vanny. Oh, the title card at the end of the episode would show randomized numbers that would eventually line up to form the game's official release date.
And then, at long last, at the PlayStation State Fair on October 27th, 2021, a new trailer for Security Breach released, and everyone was hyped. They added a lot new things to the game, and then at the end of the trailer, we finally got a confirmed release date, December 16th, 2021. Everyone was really excited, and the wait for Security Breach was finally over. During the wait for Security Breach, Dawko even hosted an interview with Steelwool Studios, and they already confirmed a few things, like the price, the size, future updates, and even a DLC for Security Breach, which we all know would turn to Security Breach Ruin, which is set to be released this year.
We forgot to mention that before the interview, Steelwool uploaded the Steam page for Security Breach, which of course gave us the game's description, with the franchise being called family friendly for some reason, screenshots that looked a bit outdated, and the size of the game being, Jesus, 80 gigabytes? Damn, Steelwool. But I digress. The game was finally released, and before we explain the game's reception, I'll have an AI summarize the game's story. Take it away.
This takes place in Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, a huge mall built by Fazbear Entertainment. Gregory is trapped in the Pizzaplex, though unexplained. He ends up teaming with Glamrock Freddy to escape the Pizzaplex before 6 a.m., while also being hunted down by Montgomery Gator, Roxanne Wolf, and Glamrock Chica, as well as the security guard, Vanessa. There are many areas to explore in the Pizzaplex, such as the atrium, the daycare, the utility tunnels, Monty's Gator Golf, Bonnie Bowl, Fazzer Blast, and many others.
Okay, summing up the game itself, you may think, this game actually sounds fun and engaging. However, once the game came out, well, Andrew, can you explain?
Sure. The game received very mixed reviews from fans. There were some that liked the game for its new spin on the series, the graphics, the soundtrack, and the characters that it had to offer. But there were also a lot of people who did not like it, and some even hated it more than Special Delivery. It was criticized for its gameplay being too much of a fetch quest walking simulator, and as well as other things that starved the gameplay. Like the goddamn staff bots.
Oh my god! I hate the staff bots so much! Like, the security bots are the worst! Like, they're so annoying! Ah! Sorry. Continue.
Anyways, it was also criticized for its visuals being too bright and flashy for a horror game, with most agreeing that the game simply wasn't scary, and the story was badly received for its awful narrative and for devaluing FNAF 6's ending.
Yeah, about that, spoiler alert, William Afton comes back. Again.
You're supposed to be dead.
Was that really necessary? They wasted a story for Vanny in favor of bringing Afton back for the 4th or 5th time. Afton needs to stay dead! In fact, Vanny was barely seen most of the game, despite being heavily marketed as the next big antagonist for the franchise. Vanny only appeared a total of 1 minute and 31 seconds. I did not make that up! 1 minute and 31 freaking seconds!
Come on, really? You can't just advertise a character and hype them up as the next big antagonist and not use them to their fullest potential. That's false advertising, and Glitchtrap wasn't even in the game. Once again, another character with a lot of potential, wasted. Not only that, but the game was also released in pretty much the same state as Cyberpunk 2077. Unfinished and practically broken. From the amount of cut content from the game to the game even being censored. Freddy isn't even allowed to say blood. Like, what the hell? It's a horror game. This is the same horror series about kids being murdered and possessing animatronic animals. I know gore isn't what this series is about and that it's more about mystery, but you don't need to censor out minor gore or mentions of injuries.
Alright, let's stop the negative talk for a little bit and try to be a bit more positive. Steelwool did make a post a day after the game's release and stated that they were going to be fixing some bugs that are crossed during the game's launch. So the game would receive patch notes in December, February, April, and way into June. How does the game stand now? Well, based on what I've heard, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than how it was on launch day, and the game is still playable for the average player. The PC version, that is. Console ports might be a different story. I heard that the PS4 ports have a lot of issues relating to frame drops and overall compression. Plus, I heard the game crashes are still a thing on PS4. Come on, Steelwool, you gotta get that fixed. There have also been optimization issues with the PS5 and Xbox ports. But I think those are the only real big issues with those versions. Despite the game's mixed reception, the game was a commercial success and would end up being nominated for December 2021's Best Game at the PlayStation's Player Choice. The game also brought FNAF back into mainstream popularity, while bringing in new fans to the series. Though this can be viewed as either a good thing or a bad thing.
However, despite the positives, there were some misconceptions on this game, especially on Twitter in regards to this game's development, or stuff on who wrote this or who decided that.
The first misconception is that Steelwool wrote the story and initial idea for a security breach. That is not true. While Scott didn't make the actual game itself, he still had creative control over the project, and he creates the overall story concept. This is a question confirmed at a 2021 Q&A panel with Steelwool, and they also said they can only suggest ideas and that Scott has the final say on everything, and this still applies even after he retired.
Speaking of which, the other misconception is that Steelwool bought the rights to FNAF after Scott retired. Now, those who think this, I can't really blame them. Scott did post a retirement letter on his website in June 2021, and there hasn't been a word on who else will be running the show since then. However, that does not mean that Steelwool owns FNAF. If you look back on Scott's letter, he mentioned that someone else would eventually be running the show, meaning that until then, he'll still run the series. He just won't make the games themselves anymore. Even if he gave the rights to Steelwool, their trademarks would have been found on FNAF merch and stuff. But since Scott's trademarks and copyrights are still found on merch at the time of this video, it's pretty safe to assume that Scott is still managing the series. All that's changed is that he doesn't use Reddit or Steam anymore, though he still makes passing comments on Dawko's charity streams now and then. Scott also said an announcement would have been made when he finds someone he trusts to take his place.
On a side note, Scott's retirement had no effect on Security Breach's development. Some have said that Scott left during midway through development because of his retirement, and that Security Breach was bad because of it. This isn't the case, because Scott hasn't left in the first place. Like we said earlier, he was still actively working with Steelwool on Security Breach, and telling them what to add as they went along. Scott was even mentioned numerous times in the Steelwool interview with Dawko. So even if the announcement hadn't been made, Security Breach would have been no different. Venny would have still been underutilized, the gameplay would have still been a boring fetch quest, the game would still been released in a broken state, FNAF 6 ending would have still been devalued, it would have been the exact same thing.
Personally, I think Security Breach would have been a little better if Steelwool didn't get overambitious and focus more on the gameplay rather than just making the Pizzaplex bigger. Bigger doesn't always mean better, and I also think Scott shouldn't have let them make the game as big as they did. He even complained about the game being so big, but instead of telling Steelwool to cut down and not bite off more than they could chew, he just delayed it. Then the game just got bigger, and he delayed it again. Then the game came out, and it was a disappointment. Scott and Steve-O are at fault for the game's final result for their own reasons. Scott should have been more responsible while working with Steve-O, and Steve-O shouldn't have bite off more than they could chew. Hopefully, they learn from their mistakes and use the criticism they got to make Ruin better. But only time will tell. We haven't gotten a teaser since May of last year, when the DLC was first revealed. So I'm hoping we get some form of a teaser this month or sometime in early 2023.
Hopefully, Five Nights at Freddy's future will be better. Heck, we even got news that the FNAF movie has officially began filming after many delays, but that is a video for another time. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Andrew, for joining in. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and we'll see you all in the next video. Hazah to the Mizah, y'all. Woo!